Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the brand new No Man's Sky update, version 6.06, also known as the Voyagers patch. And let me tell you, this one is packed with a bunch of important little fixes and improvements that are going to make your time in the game a whole lot smoother. Now, this isn't one of those massive expansions where everything feels brand new and flipped upside down. Instead, it's one of those quality of life updates where you really start to notice how much more polished things feel when you're actually playing. And honestly, I think those are just as important as the big flashy updates because they keep the game stable and enjoyable day to day. So first off, one of the biggest areas they've worked on here is the Corvette system. If you've been spending time with your Corvette, you probably know that while it's a really cool part of the Voyagers expansion, there have been some annoying little problems that break immersion or just straight up make things frustrating. For example, the mission board inside Corvettes sometimes wouldn't even be accessible, which is such a simple thing, but it really breaks the flow if you're trying to manage missions. That's been addressed, so now you should be able to interact with it every time without having to reload or jump through weird workarounds. Alongside that, fishing missions specifically were being blocked when you were on a Corvette, which again sounds like a really niche problem, but for players who were trying to complete those tasks, it was pretty frustrating. That's fixed now too, so your mission flow is smoother. And speaking of Corvettes, one of the visual improvements they've added is upping the number of guns that actually fire on them. This is one of those changes that is going to alter gameplay mechanics in a huge way, but it makes the ships feel more alive, more threatening, more powerful, which is exactly what you want when you're piloting or even just looking at one of these massive vessels. They've also tweaked bobblehead placements, which might sound silly if you don't use them, but for people who like customizing and decorating their ships, placement really matters. And now those little items should look right instead of awkwardly floating or clipping through. There was also a pretty weird bug where if you died on a derelict freighter, you could respawn onto an empty Corvette landing pad, which made no sense at all. That's been fixed, and along with that, they tackled an issue where placing a save point inside the Corvette could actually make certain Corvette parts invisible. I don't know how many of you ran into that one, but it definitely threw off immersion. Now everything stays visible, the ship feels solid, and you don't have pieces disappearing. Another big one that a lot of people complained about was galaxy changing when you warped as a passenger on a Corvette. Imagine just hitching a ride and suddenly you're yanked into another galaxy that you weren't intending to travel to. That could really mess up your save if you weren't prepared for it. That's sorted now, so you can ride along without worrying about those accidental galaxy hops. They've also cleaned up the Corvette UI so your crosshair aligns properly, which is just another one of those polish fixes that makes gameplay smoother. Oh, and recoloring all parts on the Corvette. That's finally working right. Before, sometimes it would only change some parts or not take effect at all. Now when you decide to switch up your ship's look, everything should update together the way it's meant to. Moving beyond Corvettes, there was an issue with invisible collision around the round window base part. So if you were building and felt like something invisible was blocking your path, you weren't imagining it. That's been patched up, and similarly they fixed some blocking geometry at the 4th Rendezvous space station during the Corvette expedition. Anyone who's been working their way through those knows how frustrating it can be to get stuck by invisible or misplaced geometry, so this is another one that just keeps things flowing better. Freighters also got a bit of attention, with collision issues being sorted out. You want to feel like your massive space hauler is consistent and reliable, not glitchy. And if you've ever noticed the Anomaly's landing pad display being misoriented, that's now corrected too. So everything should line up the way it's supposed to visually. Another fix I think people will really appreciate is with cross-save customization parts, like the jellyfish tank helmet. Those weren't unlocking across all save games before, which felt unfair for people who put in the effort to unlock something special but couldn't use it universally. That's been adjusted so your rewards follow you properly. There was also a frustrating bug where teleporting to your base from another system could leave you stuck, which is just game-breaking if it happens at the wrong time. Now that's resolved, so teleporting should be safe again. They also tackled some presentation issues. For instance, there were times you'd hit a black screen during the starfield loading sequence. That's supposed to be one of those visually cool transition moments, but instead you just get a void. Fixed. Missing terminals on settlement buildings were also a thing, and those have been restored so your settlements feel whole again. And I know a lot of people who will appreciate this one. They've improved reflection quality in the inventory preview viewer. It's a small visual touch, but it makes looking at your items a little bit nicer and more detailed. On the technical side, Steam input issues were cleaned up, which is big for anyone who plays with custom setups or non-standard controllers. And of course, performance always matters, so they've added optimizations that reduce hitches, especially in the Anomaly where things tend to get really busy with other players and effects. Smoother gameplay there is going to feel great. They've also addressed a rare physics crash and another rare issue where using the terrain manipulator could hang the game entirely. And of course, they rounded things out by fixing a bunch of other crashes that weren't specifically listed, but still matter a lot because nothing kills immersion faster than your game shutting down. So overall, this patch is really all about stability, polish, and making sure the new content that's been added with Voyagers works as it should. It's interesting because sometimes players overlook these patches, but when you think about it, without these kinds of fixes, the big updates wouldn't feel nearly as smooth or satisfying. No Man's Sky has grown into such a massive, sprawling experience with so many systems interacting that there are always going to be edge cases or unexpected bugs, and the fact that Hello Games keeps hammering away at them, even down to things like bobblehead placements, just shows the level of care they still put into the project years after launch. And I think that's worth talking about too, because if you've been around since the beginning, you know how rocky the game's initial launch was. Fast forward to now, and we're talking about a game that's not only redeemed itself, but has become a shining example of how to stick with your vision, keep supporting your community, and grow something into a living universe that people love to spend time in. Every update, even small ones like 6.6, is another reminder of that commitment. Now, what's cool about this update is that it doesn't just fix surface level stuff, it actually touches on areas that impact both casual players and hardcore explorers. For example, those teleportation bugs being fixed mean newer players aren't getting trapped when they're just starting to set up bases, while performance improvements in the Anomaly help veterans who spend a ton of time there showing off ships, trading, and connecting with others. It feels like a patch that benefits everyone, regardless of how you play. I've also noticed that players are already saying the game feels more responsive after this patch, especially in terms of reduced stutters. That's always a tricky thing to measure, since everyone's hardware is different, but when multiple players start mentioning it, you know those optimizations are doing their job. And honestly, performance in a game like this is huge, because when you're out in space or exploring a planet, those moments are supposed to feel smooth and seamless, like you're really there, not choppy or interrupted. Another little thing that I think is kind of underrated is the fix to recoloring on Corvettes. If you've ever been frustrated by customization systems not working the way they should, you know how satisfying it is when they finally do. Being able to properly express yourself through your ship's appearance is a big part of what makes No Man's Sky special. And this patch ensures you don't get held back by technical hiccups. And let's not forget the stability fixes related to crashes. While they didn't list every single one individually, the mention of addressing physics crashes, terrain manipulator hangs, and other rare crashes is reassuring, because those are the kinds of things that can really sour an experience when they happen.